We received quite a few questions, a lot of them coming from the school questions that they were receiving, as well as our doctors. So we'll go ahead and we'll let you all jump in, and do know that we will have, we'll send in the chat an area that if you don't hear the question that you would like to have an answer for, we will take that and get that information to you after we're done with this. All right, so we'll go with the first question. All right, how do we best support our teens in recovering from the mental impact of COVID? I'm worried about my child's ability to focus, and I'm seeing increasing tendencies for them to isolate themselves.
I'll just say, I think sort of twofold. I think it's easy for us to sort of put some of what our expectations were before the pandemic on this sort of strange time within the pandemic. So one thing is one, to give kids a little grace that we're all, and ourselves as well, that we're all kind of struggling to figure out how to adapt to what's going on. And I think, Omero, I'm sure with your school as well, you guys have, I know the schools we work with too have had to do a little bit of adjustment of how does that work and expectations. And I do think, to go back to the reset toolbox, and Dr. Belhumeur, you can certainly chat about that. I think there are some strategies on how to engage with friends, social skills, things like that, to kind of bring kids back up to speed after a year of isolation. I think there are a lot of kids who are a little anxious about getting back to spending time with their friends. So I'd start with the easier piece and then kind of work your way up. If those things aren't helpful, then we might think more about, do we need some short-term interventions or some longer-term interventions because we're a little more worried about depression or a diagnosis of some kind.
I think to piggyback on that, Heather, I really like the schema that you had in that one with all the bears, on that slide. And I know that they're going to happen it out. So if you're really seeing that it's, persistent, if you're seeing those signs of a serious issue, that's when to, seek emergency help, as you mentioned, and then access the other resources. Certainly start with the counselor at the school. Heather, you mentioned the pediatrician as well as being a great resource. And then certainly the numbers that we provided as well, if you just have any questions or doubts about it.
Thank you very much. Next one, which is, something that a lot of parents are dealing with right now, is how do you know if my child is experiencing depression, drug use, or suicidal?
I think it's always hard. And I'll just say it in the sense that kids want their parents to think the best of them, right? And so a lot of times we do kind of hide things from our parents, even though because they're the most important, most connected person to us. That being said, I think there are ways to help draw kids out better. And I think asking those sort of open-ended questions, maybe watching some TV together or watching a movie together and be able to say, well, what do you think about that? Or asking kids things like, what are things your friends are worried about? So it doesn't feel quite so in my face and personal of what's going on with you, which teens often are sort of like, I can't talk about that. But when you kind of open the door a little bit, often kids will walk on through.
All right, great. This, Mr. Krill, we'll hit you up with one here. My child is not doing well in school. I'm worried it's affecting their self-esteem. What should I do?
Sure, and that's a very valid concern that parents do have. And what we definitely look to align ourselves is with the National ASCA model. That's American School Counselor Association. And we talk a lot about having like a community sense or school stakeholders. If you do feel this directly with your child, I tell parents all the time, your school community is with them at least 50% of their waking day, Monday through Friday. So if you see this, definitely if you have that level of communication with them, get some insight from them, but maybe inquire more from the teachers who may see them on a daily basis, the school counselor who may be meeting with them one-on-one. And if you haven't yet gotten to the counselor, starting with the teachers, your school community, in that way, starting with your student and then bridging the communication with the counselor, that's going to really help to like hyper direct services support. I mentioned a bunch when I spoke earlier, But if that is a concern you have for your child, which is completely valid, getting that time and investigating the situation from different perspectives, in addition to what you see, after taking notes of all the great information that was shared tonight as well, that's really going to help the counselor to support your student, to really get in there directly instead of taking a little bit more time to try to figure things out. If you do have that ability to connect, even if it's a late email to a teacher or a late email to the counselor, they will get to you as soon as they can the next day, 48 hours at the latest, but then that will be able to better support the self-esteem of your child. And then you can build from that. If there's any linkage to outside services and support, your counselor, with parent permission, from my understanding, can then communicate and provide more support if professional outside therapy or counseling does ensue in supporting your child's self-esteem.
All right, Dr. Bellhumer, you had kind of mentioned this. What is a reasonable time that children should be spending on social media?
You know, I was prepared to answer that question, and then I looked at our resource on the Center for Online Safety, and I would say if you have that question, go there to see, because every parent's tolerance for a level of time online differs, because some parents themselves spend a lot of time online, and so their version of how much time a kid should be spending. So I don't mean to defer the question. The thing really is for children and parents to feel comfortable that their child is safe while they are online. And so, you know, even if it's 15 minutes or if it's, 5 hours, it's really that safety issue. And there are applications that school districts have access to that get triggered if there's concerns about safety, or if a child, mentions the word suicide or harming themselves or harming others. There are ways to actually get notified as a parent, for those things. So I think that, I don't know, Heather, if you have or Omira, if you have a better answer for what's an ideal amount of time online. I think really the focus is feeling for parents to feel comfortable that their kids are safe online, depending on whatever parameters they set for their family.
All right, question is, how do most families pay for mental health services?
That's a big question. I think that what I will say about that is that the services provided at Western Youth Services are no cost. If you have CalOptima, if you have Medi-Cal, if you want to access the services that I've just mentioned, they're no cost. And Dr. Husty, you can talk about the cost related to insurance and other ways. Yeah.
So there is a requirement to cover mental health services at the same level that.
Oh, so what she was going to say is there's a parity law.
Physical health services are covered, and let's put some teeth into those parity laws. Yeah. And so on the back of your insurance card, there should be a behavioral health number that you can call to access behavioral health services. But we do know the system is difficult. So, Lori's navigation is a helpful place. But there are ways to get those services paid for.
Yeah, you broke up a little bit there, Heather. So I filled in the gap of what you were saying. So
Thank you.
So what, there is a law that says behavioral health needs to be covered at the same level of physical health. And so that's the number to call on the back.
Yeah. Right, very good. My child's social interaction skills seem to have disappeared during this last year. How do I best help them with this issue?
I don't want to monopolize, but first of all, that's normal. That's a normal reaction to this abnormal situation that we've all encountered. And I think to be open, with that and invite those open-ended conversations about it really draws, has the opportunity to draw out that.
I would even further add, I mentioned before, we do social emotional learning on the school district. This year we transitioned over to this online access to the services. There's all sorts of parent resources and tips we can. So once again, it's connecting with the counselor, kind of just providing to them as honest as you feel comfortable to be the situation. From there, they can begin to tailor some items to share over to you. And once again, we can partner with various resources. But having that conversation, dialogue, bridging it over to the counselor would really help us out a lot in what we have, and we do have resources on it.
And
Very
I
good.
think-
Go ahead.
sorry. I
Go
was
ahead,
just going
Doctor.
to add one thing is I think as kids are returning to school and socializing is also think about that bridging, right? So rather than expect I'm going to go from being isolated for a year to back to where I was before that year, you might sort of think about, hey, maybe we get together for half an hour, or maybe we have an activity and we slowly sort of scaffold us back to where we were in the past with our skills.
Very good. Well, we have some questions from the chat. This is if you have a student that has developed some terrible and lazy habits this school year, would you recommend keeping them involved in some sort of summer bridge program or summer school program? Or would you let them take a mental break and tackle these habits in the fall? It's a good question.
Let's not all jump at once.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, Miro, I thought you were going to take that one.
Yeah. We were all
Oh,
looking
you know,
at you,
I
man.
would-
Mr. Corral, it's all yours.
Sure. I would just say, you know your child best as a parent. You understand them, and if you do feel and see that you can really push them, for lack of a better word, support them, guide them towards those summer type programs, kind of like as was shared not too long ago, kind of scaffolding, preparing them for fall is ideal if you can. But if you have a child and you see them that's going to be too much for them, they have developed their mental health taken a toll in however this pandemic has affected them, potentially that might be a route to be in. And once again, just consulting with your school community who's there, who's going to be there next year or the upcoming school, having those bridges of communication is what's going to be great in figuring out exactly what's going to work for you, family.
Okay, our next question, it says, if a child threatens to kill themselves and has a nervous breakdown for about 13 or 15 to 30 minutes, then the next day act like nothing happened and they say they would never do it. But it happens 2 to 3 times again in 6 months, what should they do?
I think I'm just going to say we always want to take seriously when a child makes any kind of threat about kill myself, both from a perspective of if that's the way I'm just expressing that I'm just at the end of my sort of emotional ability to cope, it's better to learn some different ways to do that so that it doesn't scare everybody. If you really are having those feelings, then of course we want to address them. So I think in those cases, it's worth a discussion with your child. I think as Mr. Corral has also said, it's worth talking with the school about, are we seeing those things in the school as well? And then from there, I think you can kind of decide, I'm seeing this enough that I'm concerned. I want to get this checked out, either through like Lori, like Dr. Belhumer was saying, through our screening process or some short therapy to see, do we need longer therapy, but maybe just to address with the child, hey, what's going on that's getting you that sort of worked up to that point? And what can we do to make things better? What can you do to cope better and learn some better coping strategies?
I
Thank
would
you.
add just a tiny little bit to that as well. Obviously, the depression is concerning. It would alarm any parent. But then if you take anything away tonight, there's 3 things from my former crisis work employment I would definitely recommend that you all consider. Is there a specifically expressed plan in which they are speaking to that suicide? Is there specific means by which they potentially would follow through? And is there a specific intent, date, time? Those 3 things are definitely going to take your concern to the next level in reaching out for support. And when you do reach out, whether it's taking them to emergency room or consulting, those 3 points are very helpful to get directly, expediently support and services if your child has not only these ideations, but is walking away with specific plans, means, or intent.
Very good. What do you think about a mandatory teacher training on mental health awareness?
I I think and I'll let Mr. Corral talk about mandatory. I will say that both Western Youth Services and Chalk has been doing a ton of teacher training within the schools, not mandatory, but doing just as what the school, because every school is different, right? And Mr. Corral has really talked about how fortunate you guys are at Capo that you have a very strong mental health program. There'd be other school districts that are like, not so strong, need different kind of support and care. So we've tried to target that training to what the school needs. I'll let Dr. Belhumeur and Mr. Corral talk about additional pieces to that.
Sure. I mean, I would just share that in terms of mandatory, I'm definitely not someone to be able to speak to that. I would have deferred to Superintendent Vitale at that point. But any way that any one of us can understand a little bit more, we're just that much more helpful to the which
Great.
knowledge is so good.
Thank you. All right. We reside in Oceanside, but my child goes to school in OC because my husband is a teacher at CUSD. Would we be able to use the WYS services?
Well, what I will say about that are the Reset Toolbox services are online. So those are, absolutely, we have people signing up that are outside of the state of California for some of the trainings, just because that's how it's set up through Eventbrite or something like that. So, those are available. With regard to the outreach and engagement services, they're designed really for OC residents and linking them to resources that are available here in Orange County. But if somebody called, I'm not sure that they would say, we can't help you. I think that there may be an opportunity to link them to other services that are available. And
all right, I'm gonna end with one more question. I know we could keep going on, and thank you so much, but I want to respect everyone's time. But this one is, let's ask the question, basically, where do they go for help with substance abuse?
I think substance abuse, I think for a long time that's been sort of two separate kinds of lines of service. And one of the good things with what the state's working on now is how do we sort of pull those together, since those problems often overlap. But I definitely think, your pediatrician, if you're already with a mental health care provider, they should be able to help you. And Lori, I don't know if your sort of linkage services include substance abuse services as well.
We do. The resources would link them to other, we would triage and identify, what's the nature. I think the point that, you're making, Dr. Cusi, is that it used to be mental health and, drug abuse or substance misuse, and it's behavioral health. And so all of our programs are behavioral health, which means it's looking and assessing for both of them and then determining which one is the greater need. Is substance abuse or misuse and drug abuse or alcohol abuse, is that the primary issue, or is it, and the mental health is secondary? And it's really up to the assessment process to determine which one is higher. But our linkage programs absolutely do that in the triage, and we have access to those resources that are available here in Orange County.
Awesome.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Mr. Corral, Dr. Husted, and Dr. Belhumeur. Thank you so much for just the experience, the insight that you've offered. I can tell you by looking at the messages in this chat, people are so appreciative to this information. It's been a hard year and a half, and we want to get, we know like this mental health, this isn't just going to go away once the kids get in there. You're going to see the teachers are going to be dealing with this as well. It could be for a couple of years. So thank you for your insight. Again, we'll have this up on our website by Thursday, but all the information as well, they can contact you and move from there. So thank you. Greatly appreciate it. Obviously, our children, our teens, that's our first priority.
Yeah. And
Thank
I just noticed, if you'll let me just
please
1 second, there was a question in the chat about parents of teens. Absolutely. reach out to Orange County outreach and engagement in South Region. If you're a parent, the resources are there for you as well. So just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you again for participating. Greatly appreciate it.